started following him, he had a quest. Do you remember what the age was?
35, I believe. He
Okay.
wanted to visit every country in the world, which was 193 at the time, if I remember correctly. I don't know
changes.
what it is right now. But yeah, and he accomplished that. I think that was one of the things that kind of got him very well known. That was one of the things that caught our attention about him.
And he started the World Domination Summit, which we had the privilege of being presenters at the first year. And then we attended 3 in total.
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this year is their last one, which I don't know what's happening with that, with the Corona stuff, but
yeah, we'll have to ask you to get a chance.
Right.
So let's see. I see people are sharing what they drink. A lot of water today, Earl Grey tea. So Kim says she added whiskey to her coffee today. It's one of those times,
right?
You know?
No judging here.
Yeah. So I'm going to see about calling up Chris right now.
All right. And you can see we're in a new setting today.
Yeah, we had some technology issues, so we're trying to get a better connection, but that's what all this tinkering is about. Hello, Chris.
Hey, Chris.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, thanks for being here. It's a great pleasure. Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, this is Chris Guillebeau. He is a New York Times best-selling author of 1 million books, I think. He's been to
That's official.
Like we said, world traveler. No one's more world traveler. He is the host of the daily podcast, Side Hustle School. What else? As Kim said, we were thrilled to present a workshop at the very first World Domination Summit. It been to
that was fun. A very well attended and enthusiastically received workshop. I remember it now 9 years later.
It's very nice.
And we have friends that we met from that we still are really close with.
Yes.
So how cool is that?
Yeah,
that's beautiful.
But we wanted to have you on, and we're grateful that you took some time out because you're a busy guy right now amidst what would have been, I'm sure, an epic tour, which is, I'm sure, postponed temporarily.
That's right.
But your book just came out 2 days ago, and I ordered the physical version, but I realized it wasn't going to get here till Saturday, so I ordered the Kindle version as well.
Nice,
and was up till 1 o'clock last night reading it, and loved it. I have to say, when I first saw it, is a different book for you with it being fiction, and I was like, boy, this reminds me of like The Richest Man in Babylon, and come to find out that's how it was described. I'm like, well, what's different about this? And what I love about it is the thing that works good with story is that it helps land the message, right? Like rather than just saying, here, go do this, there's something about the story and the narrative that works. And what I love about this book is it's modern. Like it includes a lot of the current principles and current tools, like real world tools that people currently can use to build a business, which just didn't exist 5, 10, 20 years ago. So I love that. And the other thing I love is the book is like, you can tell it was written by you because
that's a good compliment.
I don't know if that's a compliment or not. Could go either way.
No, it sounds, well, of course, like your fingerprints are everywhere. It's like, I hope so.
Yeah.
But the things I noticed were the perspective of your world travels brings a perspective to it, talking about different countries and how different people in the world do things. I loved that I can tell like all of the conversations you've had with Side Hustle School has informed a lot of the principles. And then I love, like the main character, Jake, is a runner. So I'm like, oh, there's a little bit of Chris in that as well. So long story short, just well done. Good job on the book. Totally love it.
Yeah.
Thanks. Well, I'm a big fan. I don't mean to interrupt you. I was just going to say I'm a big fan of you guys as well. And I've followed you a bit since that first WDS. And I love what you're doing with your whole project. I mean, obviously, it's inspired a lot of people. And you have continued to iterate as well, doing these conversations and lots of stuff. So well done.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. Yeah. Is there anything you wanted to share before? I don't want to keep you too long. We've got some questions for you. Is there anything you want to share right away about the book and why you wrote it and why you decided to do the fiction kind of version? It's sort of like a fable, parable kind of thing.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to talk about whatever, any questions, any topics. As for why I wrote it, yeah, I mean, that word fable, parable is kind of interesting. I think people kind of apply their own projection to that sometimes. So for me, I think I started with this idea of this main character, Jake, and he's a guy who's a millennial who has a decent job and he's a hard worker, but he's still experiencing a lot of financial struggle like so many people are. And in his case, he had a lot of student loan debt, like a lot of people do. And this ends up affecting the rest of his life. It affects his relationship. It affects his day job. He gets evicted from his apartment when it floods. And he's just trying to figure out, what should I do with my life? Basically, how can I get out of this hole that I'm in? And he realizes that, a lot of the traditional wisdom or conventional answers aren't really going to work, because he's a hard worker. Like I said, he can't just, start driving for Uber or Lyft. That's not really going to help him. Beyond like a very small amount. And so he starts going to this group called The Third Way that consists of people who are all trying to create a little bit of entrepreneurial freedom in some way without quitting their job and without spending a lot of money. So I think I started with the idea of him and just thought about it for a long time, thought about him, thought about what is his story, what is his struggle, how is it representative of a lot of other people out there. And now obviously had no idea that this, huge changing world that we're all in was going to come about. But so many people, of course, are laid off or furloughed or otherwise just feeling insecure for good reason about their finances and such. So I like the idea of telling a story. As you mentioned, I wrote a book a long time ago called The $100 Startup, which is like, a how-to guide essentially for being an accidental entrepreneur, for not following the Silicon Valley model, but just kind of like doing something, from yourself, from like a knowledge that you have or a skill that you have, finding a way to transform that or adapt it in this new economy. And so, I enjoyed writing that book, and it's done well, but it's also a very how-to step-by-step book. And a lot of people don't read those books, and I think a lot of people who need this message, they're not going to read a business book. They're not going to read a prescriptive book, but they will read a story, if it's done well. And so my hope was to write a story that was somewhat done well, that could be read, even if somebody didn't have an interest, per se, in quote unquote starting a business. They could just enjoy the story, but they would hopefully learn something along the way as well. And I think stories tend to be more memorable sometimes than just like, here's step one, here's step two, et cetera.
Yeah, totally. Well, you definitely did a good job. I was planning to read some of it to be like, well, at least I'll get an idea before I talk to him. And like I said, I was up to one because I kept turning the pages, and you did a really good job. There's some good little twists and turns along the way that I really enjoyed. And as a little aside, and this won't mean anyone who hasn't read it yet, but of course everyone will. The little asides about Buzzard, I think was the company, of like they're really creative with like press releases and emails. And I just thought that was hilarious and sad because of how realistic it was, and I just enjoyed that part. So I don't want to dwell on that because that's in the weeds, but it's a little fun thing for people that dig into it. You mentioned about the third way, and I loved that was sort of revealed throughout the book what that kind of means. And I don't think it's a spoiler alert to kind of explain to people what that third way means, because like you said, you certainly didn't plan for this book to come out at this time, but I'm glad that it did. Because I think there's a lot of people who either lost their job, or maybe this time away from their job helps them to see like, I don't want to go back to my job.
Yep.
But the idea of starting a business maybe is a little intimidating. And I think your concept of the third way makes it a little bit more accessible. So can you talk a little bit about that?
What's interesting about this time is I think even people who, are still fairly well off, or at least they're not worried about losing their job or like losing all of their financial stability, they're still kind of questioning a lot of assumptions and expectations, and asking those questions of life, like what should I be doing right now? Like maybe I should make a change, which I think is, like I said, interesting, because we're all in that same space together. We're all experiencing it differently, but yet, at the same time, we're all experiencing some of the same consequences and externalities of it. What you mentioned about Buzzard. So for those who don't know, since the book just came out like 2 days ago, I created a fake startup essentially that is essentially a satire or a parody of the third way, what Jake is trying to do. So the third way is the group that Jake goes to, the main character, consists of people who are all trying to start these little projects, as I said, without spending a lot of money, by using a skill they already have. And I call it the third way because the first way of starting a business, like the traditional way people tend to think of, is, like opening a coffee shop or a retail store or a dry cleaner or something like that. And that, of course, requires capital. It requires a certain amount of money, whether it's your own money, whether you're borrowing it from the credit card company, from the bank, from your parents, wherever. And it also involves a fair amount of risk because it may not work, right? And the consequences of failure can be significant. And then it also finally has a long time frame. You don't know if the dry cleaner is going to work until sometimes a couple of years down the road. Now, the second way is the startup way, is that Silicon Valley, Shark Tank model of starting a business, which is also very dependent on investors. It's very dependent on somebody else to kind of come along and say, yes, you have permission now to pursue this idea. You couldn't do it without my money, but here's my money. And so it also involves risk, of course. And then to have those investors, you have to have connections. So that is an asset of itself, right? Like you can have money, but not actually have connections. So both of those ways are basically dependent on other people or another company or something that's outside your realm of control, essentially. So the third way is, what I alluded to in terms of, everybody knows something, everyone's an expert at something. Everyone can start some kind of little project wherever they are, even if it's just, reselling stuff from their closet. The average American has something like $2,000 worth of stuff, in their closet that they're not using, that they haven't used in more than a year. Some people probably have a lot more. I've probably had more, in the past. Whether it's something like that or a service business or something totally different. The third way is like starting this project quickly, within a month or so. Could be today, tomorrow, could be a week or whatever. And then, as I said, not spending money, seeing quickly what works and then adjusting from there. And so that's kind of the model that I have always operated from. I did another interview the other day and someone was asking me questions about investors. And I'm like, I don't know how to answer this question. Like, I'm not going to answer a question I'm not qualified to answer, but I do know how to start these kinds of projects. So that's what it's essentially about.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it's, like I said, it's a really approachable way for people who are maybe intimidated by like, oh, I don't have to get a loan, I have to do this. And I think that's what's cool about the book is even though it's fiction, it goes through Jake's story and almost is like a step-by-step of like, how do you start, which is really kind of sneaky and cool. There are a couple people who asked about a poll. We have a poll almost every day, but we didn't do one today because I wanted to focus as much time on Chris. However, we will be giving a copy of the Money Tree away in a little bit. So keep watching and we'll tell you how you can win that in a second. So as soon as that book comes to my house, then I'll ship it out to someone else.
That's great. Thank you for that.
One thing I wanted to ask is I like kind of tying off the third way thing, but the idea that it's actually a good thing that you don't have money. Like that's a very unusual perspective, but is a really true thing and a maybe non-intuitive thing for people who want to start a business. Like, I need money, I need this, I don't know. Right. And you actually say, no, it's actually an advantage.
It's a benefit. It's a benefit. It's kind of like, when people don't have a lot of time, I think sometimes not having time can be a benefit because it provides constraints. And, if you only have a certain number of hours, a few hours or something a week to work on your project, then you're going to try to do things that matter, that are effective. And the same is true with money. I think the wrong question to ask, which I actually get all the time, is like, I have X dollars. I have $5,000, $1,000, $10, whatever it is, like to start a business. What kind of business should I start? A much better question is like, what kind of business do you want to have? What are you trying to do? What are your ideas? And if you don't have ideas, there are ways to kind of unpack that as well. And I think the time to invest in your business, this is another thing you hear all the time, is like, you can't make money without spending money, like invest in your business. I think the time to invest in your business is once it's proven a little bit. Like, it doesn't have to be proven to like some huge scalable level, but it's actually taking off. Like, you've made your first sale or whatever the metric is. That's when you're like, oh, maybe I should be there is some Facebook ads or something I should run. But in the beginning, you don't spend money at all. Maybe you buy a domain name, maybe you spend a little bit of money. The point is like, bootstrapping, I think, is something to be proud of. I think bootstrapping is something to like wear as a badge of honor. After I wrote the $100 startup, ever since then, it's been like 8 years. I continue to get emails from people all the time that are like, I beat you. I have a $30 startup, or I have like a $5 startup, a negative startup. I got paid just, which is great. It's wonderful. Like, I think the whole point is this is about the skills that you have, the knowledge that you have, not about what is in your bank account currently.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have anything you wanted to?
No, but I'm remembering at the WDS at the end when you gave those books away, and then you gave everyone $100 with the book to.
Yeah, that was a while. That was a while back. Yeah, that was fun.
That was really, really powerful. I think it really empowered everybody there to just like keep.
Now you don't have an excuse, right?
Right. Yeah, and I think we did some kind of contest with our company to give it away and all that, but that was pretty powerful, Chris. That was really sweet.
Yeah. What do you think right now is like what is the biggest opportunity you see in this crisis? Because that's one of the things that we've been trying to encourage people is, there's a lot of things to be sad about and frustrated about and worried about, but there's also a lot of opportunities if you're looking for them. Like we tell people, like, what does this make possible? And so I'm sure you have a really unique perspective on that. What would you say is maybe an under the radar opportunity that a lot of people might be missing right now?
I think there are a lot of opportunities, above the radar, if that's a phrase. Like, I think I completely agree with you about, in a time of uncertainty, where is the opportunity? And the theme I've been thinking about is, if you think of progress and disruption as being kind of opposed, whenever there's progress, like whenever there's advancement in society, technology, or wherever else, there's also like negative effects. There are adverse effects. If one technology advances, then the previous technology or industry is kind of harmed in that process, and they have to evolve and adapt. So the corollary has to be true as well. When there is like great disorder and great disruption, there are also, as you said, opportunities. There are possibilities there. And so I think all of us really, have to ask a question like, how does this apply, to my life, to my work, to what I'm doing now, what I want to do next? A couple of fields that are probably obvious. I think wellness, anything to do with wellness is huge. From home exercise, from people who are no longer able to go to their gym and their trainer, you see so many people adjusting to that and adapting to that. And I think the gyms and the trainers who were a little bit ahead of the curve in just recognizing how important that is in general are now doing better because of that, whereas other people are kind of catching up. Anything to do with remote work at all. So many people are adjusting to this world. It's hard for people, if they haven't done it before. It can be really difficult for people, especially if you've always worked in a corporate setting. Then you go to remote work, you have like all these things to get used to in terms of your schedule and your routine and the technology and the web conferencing. And some of us take it for granted, like if we've worked for ourselves, for a long time. So anything to do with that, or with training corporations, like corporate training associated with all the transition that's happening in that. And then broadly speaking, what you guys are doing, connection and community, I think people have such a longing for it. Like I'm also doing like these daily Instagram lives, and it's really interesting because the first couple of times I did it, I was like, well, I don't really have an agenda here. I don't have much that I'm actually teaching. I kind of realized people actually just want to hang out. People actually are just looking for space. And so anything that can be done to bring people together and help them understand that they are not isolated, or even if we are isolated, we're isolated together. It's a weird thing. Then I think that has potential. So none of us can solve like all these problems or like the big problem of the world, but I think each of us can maybe ask like, what's one small part of that I can solve? Like, how can I contribute, whether it's to wellness, to people adjusting to this new way of life, or to connection or community. I think those are three obvious things that come forward.
Cool. I heard the other day someone said that there could be an opportunity for people who have had coronavirus and have developed the antibodies against it to now be like professional huggers, to go to the people who are lonely and give them hugs. And I'm like, that's kind of a cool thing. And maybe that will be a thing, like a DoorDash hugger,
That's right. That's right.
So I want to, anyone who's here that would be interested in Chris's book, write in the comments your favorite place that you've ever traveled. So that doesn't have to be a foreign country, but it could be, or it could just be, anywhere in your own country.
Can we ask Chris that too?
He probably gets that question every freaking time. But I've never heard the answer. I didn't want to be that guy.
I want to be that guy.
Somebody said, I was just reading in the comment. Oh, Phil is there. Hey, Phil, what's up? Good to see you. I know Phil. And Kim was saying hi as well. Hey, Kim. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I think you were going to say something about favorite place. Somebody asked me today, they were like, what's your favorite room? And I was like, that's a great question, because we're all like confined, like we're all kind of locked down. They were like, I was going to ask you what your favorite country was, but since you're not going to a lot of countries right now, what's your favorite room? And I was like, okay, well, I guess my home office. So it's not a very exciting answer, but a good way to kind of reframe the question, because again, we're all in the situation of not traveling. And I was supposed to be doing this 40 city book tour, and now I'm doing 0 cities. But still able to connect with people, thanks to technology like this, and thanks to people like you.
Man, we wondered, because that was another time we got to see you was when you came to Madison. And what was the deal with that tour? I remember all your tours are kind of interesting.
I think that was like the first time you did.
That had to be the first one. I think I've only been to Madison for an event one time, and that was in the very first tour.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you go to every state that time?
Yeah, I was doing all 50 states and every province in Canada.
That's right.
That's right. I knew there was a quest. You're like the
first
quest
unconventional book. Yeah, I'm into these like streaks. It's very dangerous because once I start something, it's like I'm like, oh, I've got to keep going or what. I have this Apple Watch streak of 385 days now. I just don't want to let it go. Like I don't like the cost of letting it go is so much more than the cost of just like pushing through and doing it. So I don't necessarily recommend that, by the way.
How it works. Let's see. We got a question here. By the way, if anyone has any question, we got a few more minutes with Chris. Jenna is asking, can you share any work at home tips?
Any work at home tips? Well, have you guys talked about this? I feel like this is something you might have talked about already.
We talked a little bit about it. I'd like to hear from your perspective, though.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if I have anything like beyond the basics, which people have probably heard before, but I guess, just to start with that, like having some sort of structure is always good. I have a lot of structure in my life, for me, my highest value is freedom, but freedom doesn't mean like a lack of constraints. It's just that my constraints are self-imposed, right? Like right. I'm trying to do what's important to me. So I try to create that environment around that. So having some structure, having some routine, maybe having a dedicated workspace, if you have the luxury of being able to do that. Even if you can't have a whole like home office or something, is there like a corner or a closet or somewhere that like you go there and that's what you're doing, for your work, and then you leave it, and you take a lunch break and you come and go. Maybe one thing that's kind of interesting that does present possibility is now with everybody doing more remote work and working from home, I think it gives a lot of them an opportunity to learn their ideal working hours and to learn when they are the most productive. So if you have a job where you actually have to be online, from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., then that may not help. But for a lot of people to have some flexibility, you have to be there for meetings, but you also have some time you can do your own thing. It's really good to just kind of pay attention. When am I the most productive? When is it good for me to take a break? For me, I like to work pretty early in the morning. And I go for a while, but then I'm not so great for like 2 or 3 hours in the afternoon. Then I can kind of pick it up and do some more stuff. Just knowing that pattern about myself. Dan Pink wrote a book called Win, which is really good, kind of exploring this concept, helping you find, there's like an online test, helping you find your ideal, working hours, your ideal time to wake up and all that kind of stuff. So those are the first things I think about. And, just establishing some sort of ritual as well to go with the routine. Like, what do you do when you close things out for the day? Like, because I have the bad habit of I never close things out, and like I'm always going back to stuff. And partly that's because I like to do what I'm doing. Like I feel very fortunate I can do it. But I do think, especially when you're adjusting to something new, or in these times which are so stressful, like a lot of people are having a lot of stress and for good reason. So I try not to, judge people or try to help free them of the guilt of like stress eating, or if you have some bad habits, it's normal, accept that. But as much as possible, try to take care of yourself during this time.
Cool. Thanks for that. I wanted to, again, point out to people that the Money Tree book and then the one you said, the $100 startup, they're a really good companion. Depending on the type of person you are, you might like one over the other. But I also like the Side Hustle book that was, I think it was last year or 2 years ago, because it's like full color and it's got the case studies to see, like, be inspired by what other people have done. But what I want to ask you is, it's one thing to say how much, what should I do, or will this work, or will that? If someone is kind of interested in, like, I kind of want to do like my side hustle, I want to start something, what is the mindset that you think they need to have to, like, what's the thing that's like, no matter what, you need to own this part of it?
Okay. I think firstly, they need to be somewhat curious, which is a skill that anybody, or a trait that anybody can develop. I think you guys are probably pretty good about encouraging people in that. Curiosity is not something that's taught, in school. Like, here's how you learn to be curious. But the ability to pay attention and observe, and like, especially when you're trying to understand, like, where do good ideas come from? Where do profitable ideas come from? being able to like spot those ideas is kind of a skill that can be improved upon with time. So once you have that ability of being able to spot ideas, or even just looking in your life, what are the things that I am good at? What do people ask me about? What do people kind of see me as an expert in? Like a number of years ago, I started this business all about travel hacking, about using frequent flyer miles and points to go places and such. And I never actually would have imagined doing that as a business. I just noticed that people kept asking me questions about it all the time. Like as I was flying around the world and, using these mistake fairs and such, and people are like, how do you do that? And so I started creating some products and eventually a membership site for it. And so if there's something like that people are asking you about all the time, that's a good like source for where to go to. And then the second thing is, in terms of mindset, it's really just like you have to do something about it. You have to just, because everybody has an idea, and like ideas are not valuable on their own. Like ideas are really like, the 1% of the solution and the 99% is the doing the work. So just what is the step in front of you right now? If you can't see the ultimate vision, don't worry about that. What's the next thing you can do to get closer to like actually having this product or service, very simple product or service, a one-page website, a PayPal button, a Venmo button, whatever it is, out to the world, within a very short period of time. I think that like if you start with that, everything built on that.
Yeah, we talked about a concept we talked about a lot earlier this week is the idea of tinkering. And it's sort of that playful way of talking about experimenting. And I think a lot of people get overwhelmed by all the things they should do or could do. And so I love that advice about just like start small. Like a lot of times it's very unsexy what the first step is. And that's exactly fine, right?
That's the way it is.
The complications. All right. Well, I am randomly looking at who should win this. I don't know how to pick this. How about this? Get an idea?
I think you should just like literally like scroll and then pull your finger. Like then it's totally fair.
Okay. We've got Kim Stanfield McMillan, Nova Scotia.
Nice.
That was the first one I hovered
Kim's
over.
Been really selling me on Nova Scotia.
She's been helping with the comments too.
Yes, she's been sharing Chris's book. So it must be meant to be. Kim, we will reach out to you after the show and we'll get your information to be able to send you the book. I think that's like the main stuff. Is there any last second?
Yeah.
thing?
Is there anything else you want to share before?
Obviously, the book is available everywhere, right? The Money Tree, Chris Guillebeau. Whereas our kids used to say, I don't know, it's been a while, but they used to call it Chris Guillebeau.
Guillebeau.
I've heard all of them. I've heard every possible pronunciation.
I thought Kentucky was bad, but
we're in the same family there. I don't have anything else to say. I just want to say it's a wonderful conversation. Thank you for having me. Thanks everybody for participating in the chat. Love what you guys are doing, as you know.
There's just a curious question. Do you think that you'll pick the tour up later, or do you think it's like plan B? Good
question. I would love to. Like right now, I'm saying it's postponed, not canceled. Yeah. I would love to because I do really enjoy it. But I think it's also important for me to be able to like adjust and adapt too. I've been thinking about this like for a long time. I think I did that because I was comfortable with that. Like that's what I've done before. So that's what I should do again. And that's not always the right answer. So it's good for me to adjust and adapt to. So I think it's partly a question of what happens in the world, which is still somewhat unknown. And then also, what happens, with me and how do I grow and how do I want to change and improve?
That's a great mindset.
Yeah.
All right, Chris. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. Again, the book is The Money Tree. Definitely recommend it, as well as I can't recommend any one book of yours over another. They're all good.
Awesome.
Thank you again for taking the time to be with us today.
Good to see you.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks, Jason. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Chris. See ya.
All right.
Awesome. I'm sure you guys, if you had not been introduced to Chris, like this is a huge opportunity to just get online and check out his stuff. I mean, he's been writing blogs for over 10 years at least.
Yeah.
I mean, which is kind of how you got introduced to his stuff, right? His blog.
Yeah, I think his blog was a lot about his quest of traveling to all the different countries, and it's fascinating. And like I said, this Money Tree book is kind of cool because the main character goes to Ethiopia and talks about what the culture is like there and what things we have in common and what things are different, and really, really cool. So but that's how I first heard about it, and
Looks like Phil says his 3x5 manifesto was my first intro.
Yeah, I remember. I actually remember that, Phil. I remember that. I have that as well. So, yeah, Chris is a great dude. That's one of the things. He's very, very kind and helpful. And he is, we've known him for a long time, and he just, becomes more and more successful, but he's still super down to earth and just an awesome guy. So,
and obviously practices what he preaches, because his answer to the tour question is completely in line with everything else he's writing about,
right.
of like what needs to be adjusted in my processes. So pretty cool.
Yes. Let's see.
Last name.
Tracy or Jill asks, can you give us his last name? Yes.
Don't make me spell it.
It's Guillebeau. Hopefully his name is actually in the chat there. And so there you go. Phil's got it. Thanks, Phil. Yeah, but it was Lucy used to call him Chris Guillebeau.
Guillebeau, yes. Yeah. When we first connected with the World Domination Summit, the kids were really little. We'd be like, we're gonna go see Chris Guillebeau, and they would mess up his name every time. But so, I want to show this new painting. Jason was in the studio today, and literally I gasped when I saw this in awe of how beautiful this is. So check this out. This just was like a blank canvas a couple hours ago. Is that true?
Yeah, it's true. I just started this morning.
And I don't know if you can kind of tell that it's kind of, what's with this canvas? It's not white.
Well, it's a normal canvas is canvas. And so it's got a normal brown color, but a lot of times artists will gesso it with white gesso. And this is got a clear gesso. And so I thought, well, I want to use the color of the canvas in the painting. And so this background, I'm going to leave as it is.
Yeah, I love it.
But what's cool about it, and I don't want to share it, but the parts that aren't done on it yet are what going to make it really cool. So it's kind of, I'm really excited about the concept behind this painting. Right now, it just looks like a couple eggs in a nest, but there's something, some little touches that I think will make it cool. But
yeah,
it's been
definitely popping off the canvas there. And then he's got another one started, and then he said I could only show you one. So we'll show you the other one tomorrow. We have a really good guest.
Another good guest.
Yes,
thank you.
So excited
for being here. Also, reminder, Wonder Hunt starts Monday. So you want to be a part of it. One of the things that happened yesterday, what we were talking about when we got cut off by adultitis and technology, is we were talking, someone asked Kim if their 10-year-old daughter could be a part of it and share what your thoughts were.
She said that, with all the transition of school being, at home and all this stuff, that her 10-year-old was really going through a hard time. So she thought if they did it together, maybe that would be an opportunity to have something to look forward to, something outside of curriculum, and to, have-tos, and get them outside together exploring for the wonder. And so I said, I think that's amazing. I mean, I love that idea. The only caution I gave her was some of the inspirational messaging might be a little over her head, but obviously if they do it together, if nothing's inappropriate, so that really pumped me up. She signed up, and so that was pretty exciting. So it's going to be amazing, you guys. And after a holiday weekend that is going to be really odd for a lot of people, right, of not being with family or not celebrating in the kind of traditional ways you usually do, I think it's going to be a great way to really kick off the rest of our spring.
Yes. So check out escapeadulthood.com/wonderhunt. I see Kim says she needs the link for the alumni price. So Kim will get that to you.
Yep.
Thank you guys for being with us today. Thanks again to Chris Guillebeau. I almost said Guillebeau. And check out the Money Tree tomorrow. We have another special guest. Be here at 3 o'clock. We hope you'll join us again. Thanks again for being